See, hello everybody. It's Carlo here at Forge Glory, custom leathercraft, and haven't done a live video or anything in a while, and so in my videos I talk a lot. One of the things I talk a lot about that I feel is a benefit of my shop is that everything's done by hand, and and so I do what's called saddle stitching. So how is saddle stitching different than using a machine? And what's the benefits of saddle stitching? What's the benefit of it taking so long that it makes it worth worth the money, worth the time? Well, first let me explain how saddle stitching is done. There are a lot of techniques, and I use, in one item, I'll do a couple different techniques. So the first technique I'm going to do here is I'm going to take, see, I've already done the first couple stitches here, sewn it onto this, and then I'm going to take one thread and I'm going to stitch this whole line using one thread. So with saddle stitching, you have one long thread, it's looped through, and on both ends you have needles ready to sew. So what some people do is they'll go stitch by stitch, one needle in, one needle, through each hole. So I will do that sometimes, and you'll see later on when I do it. But when I have a straight line that I can easily get to, it's a lot faster to just do one needle all the way down. Wow, I've got 15 people watching already. That's awesome. Thanks for watching, everybody. Welcome to the party. So, oh, come on. So what I do is I take the leather, cut it to the shape that it needs to be. And then I take these what are they called? Prongs, I guess. And line it up where I need them. Take a mallet and make the holes in the leather. So the leather, I made all these holes for the needle to go through. And pretty much start sewing it. So with this technique of just doing one needle at a time, it's a little faster because I don't have to stop, drop the needle, pick up the next needle. And it's really easy whenever you're doing, a straight line or something. And when I have something like this, like here, the lid, the way that it's sewn, that's how I do it. I'll do one needle all the way through, and then I'll take the other needle and come back and complete the stitch. So, I don't know. I hope this doesn't bore you guys watching me sew. Some people say it's rather cathartic to watch and relaxing after a long day of work. But this is my work. So as you see what it's doing, it's creating, the half stitch. And then I would take the other needle and finish off the stitch. And what I have here in my hands, what I'm making is a heat shield. And this one, it's really cool. So it's got the pouch. I haven't done the holes for the straps yet. But it's one with a double pouch. So kind of like saddlebags, but in the shape of a heat shield. And so the benefit of this is that since it goes through, so a sewing machine, it would go here, push the thread through the hole, and then another thread would come up and loop with it, and then go to the next hole, push it through the hole, loop with it, push it through the hole, loop, hole, loop. But now if you cut it, all those loops, you guys have done it. You know, you had a shirt that you bought and there was a thread and you pulled on it, or you cut the thread on accident, you pulled on it and the whole thing fell apart. You don't get that with a saddle stitch because every stitch is locked in. And so if I cut this one, all the rest of these are still going to stay in place because it's not attached to the back. You know, it's not just looped through, it's actually all the way through. Let's see. Lou, Danny, always nice and relaxing watching someone else work, which is why my bosses just stand there and watch their workers. Yep. I have to say, watching other people work is nice and relaxed. Like, oh, look at all that work they're doing. What wonderful people. And luckily for me, I mean, if my disabilities weren't what they were and I had another job, I'd still be doing leather work on the side. You know, I'm very blessed that the leather work is enough for me to support me and my family of 6 and all the things that we want to do. But yeah, if I didn't have disabilities, I'd actually still be in the Army for another 4 years or whatever, so I could get my 20 years. But that didn't happen. I was so disabled. They were like, "We're not going to promote you. You're too broken." And honestly, I was. You know, they should have kicked me out of the Army 2 years before I did get out. 2, maybe even 3 years before I did get out, when it was determined that, you know, I was too broken to serve. But because of loopholes, they couldn't med board me, so they kept me in. It's kind of frustrating because, you know, nobody wants to be that guy who's soaking up a paycheck. And, you know, I couldn't deploy. I couldn't do physical activities. Sucked. But loopholes made it so I could stay in till my 10-year mark, and then I got out, worked for Pepsi, and then my disabilities got too great that I had to quit Pepsi. But luckily, Forge Glory was taken off. So, and with Forge Glory, I can sit down at my table and do all my work. Now, if something ever happens to my hands, well, I'm just screwed. And luckily, very luckily, I can sit forever just fine. It's when I stand up and start walking around, my back, my torn meniscus, you know, that's what kills me. So riding a motorcycle is not outside of the realm of things that I get to do. So I'm having a good time. Let's see. Got a question here from Mero Cortez. What thread is that? I use this is the Niletex thread. It's a synthetic thread and it's coated with wax, which helps it go through the holes a lot easier. But yeah, so it has wax. The thread has wax on it, which helps it go through the holes a lot easier. And also, what I do is there's a couple ways you can make the holes. One, you can have these irons to make the holes, or you can have a hole punch to make the holes. And some people will use the hole punches, but here's the thing I don't like about hole punches. So you use the hole punch. Now you have a hole that is bigger than the thread, and you know, it's always there, and so you're going to have a little bit of movement between the the two pieces of leather that you're sewing together. So I really don't like using a hole punch. I prefer these forks because once the leather dries, the fibers in the leather will close up and cinch around the thread and give you an even better hold. Where if you have a hole, it might shrink up a little bit, but it's still going to be a hole, and that thread's still going to be loose. And so you get a much better grip, I should say, when you use one of these, as opposed to making a hole. But the hole punch I use, for the rivets or for the belt straps. So here, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I switched to using the second form, another form of saddle stitching, and that is the hole by hole. And I do that on the whenever I go around a corner, because it just makes it a lot tighter. And then I do it on these pouches because, sorry if my speech sounds slurred, but I'm holding one needle in my mouth while I work with the other. But I do it on these pouches because, if you sew up the half, if you do one needle all the way through, one side of the thread all the way through, and then it's closed, and it's really hard. This is like a 1-inch pouch, so it's really hard to get in there and do the other needle. There we go. And so it's called saddle stitching, and it's the highest, like the best way to stitch. It gives you the most firm stitch, especially if you use the irons. You just come out with a better product than if you use a sewing machine. That's not to say that someday I'm not going to use a sewing machine. I might someday for like the wallets and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm against it, but I know some of you who are waiting 3 months for your products would probably like it if I could find faster ways to do things. But still, with something like this, can't do this with a sewing machine. So the way that other manufacturers do something like this is they use thin leather and they sew it inside out, and then they put it right side out after it's sewn together. Look at this leather. You're not you're not going to be able to get this inside out and then go right side out again. It can't happen with this leather. You have to use a thin leather to do that. And so this is technically the only way to do it, unless you see how this gasket's going on. Unless I did the gasket the other way, and then I might be able to get a machine in there. But man, I don't know. I think it looks crappy with the gasket going. If the gasket was looped like this instead of over like that, I don't know. I don't think I'd like the look of it. I think it makes it look cheaper. What do you guys think? Let's see. Look at this. You do great work. Thanks. No problem. Thank you. So once I'm here on this side, this is how I do it. And so when I'm doing the holes, I will take this, you might be able to see a little bit of a double-sided tape there. I will take this and I'll tape it to the base piece and then put the holes through both at the same time. That way the holes line up. And then I take this gasket. Let's see if I have an example over here. Here's a gasket that hasn't been dyed or anything. I take this gasket and I count how many holes, and I put that many holes into the gasket on both sides, and then I dye it. And then I start sewing it together. Stitch by stitch. I always wear gloves whenever I do leather stitching, or whenever I do this stitching, because the needles will tear up my fingers. Give me some nasty calluses, which isn't very fun. So here's a question for everybody watching. Did you guys see the windshield bag that I made recently for the Scout Bobber? What'd you guys think of that? That was the first, I made two at the same time. First one I ever made. I think they looked awesome. I think they look good. What'd you guys think of it? I could do those in black. I could put art on them. The two that I made, one guy just wanted white stitching on it. The other guy didn't want anything on it. So I can do, different colored stitching. I can do them in black, brown, whatever color you want. Put whatever art you want on them. I think it came out good, but I want to know what you guys thought. And with every stitch, when I come through and I pull it, once the stitch is complete, pull it real tight. Oh, one important thing about this that I found is to have the leather gasket a little damp with water. And so I'll take my my spray bottle, I'll spray down the leather gasket, which makes the gasket a lot more flexible. So when I do this motion, when I'm tightening down that stitch, it doesn't tear through the leather. Imagine getting to the end and you do the last couple stitches and it tears through the leather and you got to take this whole thing back off and redo it. That, my friends, sucks. So I learned that if the leather's wet, it won't tear through, and then when it dries, it'll be like really tight and secure on there. Little tricks of the trade that you learn is trial and error. And, before, like I said, I don't want people to think that I've been sending out dry leather that's going to crack on them or break. Before I send everything out, it gets a coating which fills in those pores, keeps it moist, and helps protect it from the elements. But while I'm stitching it, I don't have that stuff on there because it I don't know. I guess I could put it on there, but I don't. I find this is better just to wait till it's completely dry and then put the finish on it. So generally when I'm working, I have my YouTube up and video after video of my favorite moto vloggers going on in the background to fill the silence. So do you guys follow any motorcycle vloggers? Anybody putting videos up? I have to say my favorite is probably Shade Tree Surgeon. You know, everybody has videos that are, you know, good or just, you know, and everybody has those videos that are, you know, you find one where it's like, okay, that was boring. But when it comes to Shade Tree Surgeon, I haven't found a video yet that's boring, or that I thought was boring. He's a funny, entertaining guy. I enjoy watching him, and so I try to give him a shout out whenever I can because I think more people should watch him. It's pretty good. I have to say my second favorite is probably his niece. I mean, she's only got 2 videos up, but she's really entertaining to watch. I think she's funny, informative too. Only 2 videos up, and I'm already impressed with her. And my third favorite is going to have to be Blockhead. I know a lot of people watch him. Blockhead's pretty awesome. I've only seen a couple of his videos that I thought were boring. They all can't be winners, right? Unless you're Shade Tree Surgeon, then they're all fun. But, you know, I don't know. I haven't seen any of his really old videos. I've only started to watch them since the beginning of this year. My kids are like, you can find anything on YouTube. And I'm like, really? I don't think YouTube has anything for me. Just a bunch of kids or, you know, people doing stupid stuff. And then I got on there and I was like, oh, okay, there's some interesting stuff on here. I don't know, is everybody bored yet? Watching me stitch? Then the annoying part with white stitching is the white stitching likes to get dirty. And so I pretty much have to use very clean gloves. Now I know you guys are looking at this one and thinking, oh, that's got dye on it, but it's dye from a couple days ago. But if it had black dye on it, nope, I can't use those gloves when I'm doing stitching with white stitching, because the white will take off the gloves. Let's see, scrolling back to see if anybody's asked any questions. A whole lot of watching. A lot of people watching. Welcome to the party, everybody. I wish I was like those fancy YouTubers who had, you know, they got their intros and their whatevers and music in the background. And I found every time I use music, Facebook mutes the videos because, you know, I don't have the rights to it. And so I don't know where they get their music from. My oldest daughter plays the guitar. Maybe I can get her to do some guitar riffs for me. I'm gonna have it in the background for you guys. There we go. Come on. But yeah, that's what I do. One stitch at a time, one hole at a time. And really no way to do this any faster. There's a whole lot of ways to do it a lot slower. And these needles that I'm using are what they call the triple aught. And that's a reference to the hole they have in them. And so you really need to match the hole of the needle with the thread that you're using. Let's see if I can find them here. Yes, needle harness 000 large. That's the kind that I use with this thicker thread. If I was using a thinner thread, I'd use a double aught, because as you can see, when the thread is thinner, it's just going to slip through your needle way too easily. So you got to match up the needle to the type of thread that you're using. Otherwise, it's a pain in the butt. If the eye of the needle is too small, you're not going to get the thread through. Also. Okay, I'll just set that down and fix it later. So while I'm finishing up this last little bit here, let's talk about motorcycle rides. For a lot of people, the season is ending. You know, your motorcycle's coming to an end because, you know, fall's coming. You live in a state in the north where it's cold, and it really sucks to ride in the cold for you. But, my iPad just went down, so I'm not going to be able to see you guys reply or anything. Let's see what's going on. Okay, it's plugged back in, but it'll take a second. Anyway, what are your favorite rides that you've been on? What was the worst ride you ever been on? I think my worst was going up to Kansas City from Clarksville, Tennessee to go see Metallica. It wasn't bad because of Metallica. It wasn't bad because I was on a motorcycle. It was bad because the whole way there, it was nothing but hot rain. And so I had my wet weather gear on. I got the top, the bottom, and boot covers, which is pretty much like wearing a plastic bag. And then with the humidity and the heat that was going on, I was dying. I was dying of heat. I was getting overheated. I had to stop a couple times. Couple times more than I wanted to. Down, I don't know how many Gatorades, how much water, but it was a ton because I was just sweating like crazy. And then I got to Kansas City. Yeah, it pretty much rained from the time I left the house. Oops, I went to the wrong hole on that one. Wrong hole, huh? That's what she said. And
Dad, I know you did not.
oops, my daughter heard me tell that joke. My bad. But yeah, that was miserable. Getting up there, sweating like crazy, all the way up to Kansas City. And then when I got there to Kansas City, it was still raining, and the concert was at the Royals Stadium outdoors, and so I was just getting rained on like crazy. Not the funnest time. Not the funnest time I ever had. Metallica was awesome, of course. But the people I was watching, but the people who were sitting around me were, I don't know, a bunch of frat boys in front of me with their polos and khaki shorts going, yeah, bro. And then this dude next to me who was like, this is the music I listen to whenever I'm mad at my wife. I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, Metallica fans are from every walk of life. Those kids in front of me, like, yeah, bro. I mean, you could tell, like, they went out, they all had their khakis on, they all had their polos on, and they all had these little lightweight raincoats on. And it's like they stopped at the same place, and they all bought the same bandana so they could look hardcore wearing a bandana at the Metallica concert. I was like, hey, man, they keep a Metallica alive. So I guess I can't complain too much. Shouldn't make fun of other people, they say. Don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Yeah, just chuckle on the inside, I guess. And this other guy standing next to me, he literally told me, he's like, yeah, this is the music I listen to when I'm mad at my wife. And I was like, well, what do you listen to normally then? I was like, yeah, I guess it's angry music if you want it to be. So because of the extra stops, I got there late, which frustrated me. And I missed Volbeat, who opened for him. And then they had Mike D from the Beastie Boys come out and do his little DJ thing, but I had no idea it was Mike D. And his little DJ thing that he was doing really sucked. So I was like, who's this guy? And they're like, that's Mike D from the Beastie Boys. And I'm like, this sucks. Could have been that I was just in a bad mood, but... Alright, we're coming here to the end. So that was the funnest but yet worst trip I ever made. It was miserable. The best trip I did was actually to Sikeston, Missouri, from Clarksville, Tennessee, to Sikeston, Missouri. I went with this local church group, and we rode to Sikeston, and we ate at Lambert's. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Lambert's, but it's what they call the home of the throwed rolls. So their bread, guy comes out with the bread, he stands on one side of the dining room, and you raise your hand, and he throws the bread at you. It was something that started a long time ago when they were just a little diner. Started out as a joke. They were in Ozark, Missouri, when it was just a little bitty diner, and people would come in, and they had a hard time keeping up with having hot bread. And so instead of going from table to table to bring everybody hot bread, they just threw it at them. And so now whenever you go to a Lambert's anywhere, that's what they do. They throw the bread at you. And, you know, their plates are huge. They'll give you a ton to eat. It's country style food. Ribeyes, steaks, fried catfish type stuff. Pretty good. That one was a good trip because I went with a buddy of mine, this church group, and you know, it was all back roads. And then we got to this one part where there was a river and there was a ferry boat there. And we loaded up our motorcycles. You know, there was a couple cars too. And we took the ferry across the river. That was pretty scenic, pretty awesome to see. So that was probably one of my favorites of the long trips I ever took. Okay, so I'm here at the end of this. So I'm going to snip it. To make this gusset part sit down in there. And this last stitch is always the hardest one because it likes to tear through the leather. And if it tears through, then I have to do this whole thing over again and be very frustrated. So I gotta be really careful with it. Make sure it's going all the right way. Okay. Oh, no. Be good to me. Be good to me. Come on. It's just the last stitch. It's the last one. You gotta make it through. There we go. Now we're cooking. Okay. Take our needles off. And so the pressure here is enough to keep these thread from not moving. But just to do a little more, I like to throw a square knot in it. So I have the pressure that's keeping it all together. Now I have a knot, you know, really not needed, but I like to do it all the same just because I'm paranoid and I don't want these things to come apart on you. Snip it. And then I take a lighter and I burn it. And since this is a synthetic thread, it pretty much melts that knot into a big ball of nylon. Pretty much. And so this, I want it to be about 2 inches, so right there. And cut it, put it down inside. And there you go. That's how I do the saddle stitching. Now I just got to put some holes in that and it'll be done. Well, got to put some holes in the straps and then I have to apply the finish to the leather and it'll be done and in the mail tomorrow. Thank you all for watching. I hope I didn't bore you, but that's how I do the saddle stitching. Every single stitch is done by hand, so it's stitched here by hand. You know, the gusset to the heat shield, and then the pouch to the gusset. And then this this patron wanted some extra stitching, white stitching to match his seats because his seats are tan with white stitching. So it has the extra white stitching to match his seats. All done by hand, and that's how I do it. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Remember, here at Forge Glory, we're all about the leather, your design and my shop coming together to make some great products. Have a great day.